These are the NFL free agent signings and trades from day one and before of NFL free agency, graded for fantasy football. So today is day one of NFL free agency, or I think more accurately, it's day one of the legal tampering period where teams can announce the tampering that they did prior to the legal tampering period through selected reporters and agent releases so that they can all get their dues in for the work that's been done prior to this day. So thought what better way to ring this in than to do some grades for fantasy football. And we're going to grade a couple of these moves that happened today, as well as some franchise tags that happened before and some trades that happened before as well. So I got this wheel with 10 of the moves as well as some free advertising for whoever's paying for this website. We're going to spin the wheel and talk about each of them again from a fantasy perspective, grading them A through F. So let's see who we start with in this discussion. It is going to be Alec Pierce staying with the Colts. So this one is near and dear to my heart because in my main dynasty league, Alec Pierce is a player that spent a lot of the season on the bench for me last year and had some good games for me when I did have to plug and play with him. And I was hoping to hopefully move him into my starting lineup this upcoming season, depending on how it worked out with free agency. And I would say for me and other Alec Pierce dynasty owners, and as well as prospective Alec Pierce owners, this is not the best move for 2026. The reason being is he was in conversations apparently with the Patriots, with the Niners. There might have been some other teams in there, but those are the two ones that kind of got the headlines as far as other teams that he could have gone to. And I think that either of those teams would be better for him for 2026. You could make an argument that even that they would be better further on as well. Because, of course, last year he had a great season when Daniel Jones was playing, but we don't know how long it's going to take for Daniel Jones to get back and what he's going to be like when he gets back. It's still an Achilles injury. I know that we've improved with this kind of surgery, but it's still an Achilles injury. So it'll be interesting to see how that all comes together and who is playing quarterback for the Colts in the meantime. And the Colts have not had good luck with a quarterback really at all. I mean, even Daniel Jones, they had bad luck with him last year. He came out and played great, and then he ends up getting hurt and was playing hurt and then gets even more hurt. So overall grade, I'm going to give this a B because we saw what he could be with Daniel Jones. And if they could get that back together, then obviously this is exactly where Alec Pierce is meant to be. He gets to stay on the same team. And they moved away from Michael Pittman Jr., so he is the number one guy, especially with the money that they gave him. But the question marks around Daniel Jones make it not so great for 2026. Probably a better move for 2027 and beyond, depending on what the backup quarterback situation is for next season. All right, who's next on our list? And we got rid of our advertising there, so that is good. Okay, Breece Hall staying with the Jets. I'm conflicted with this one because on one hand, Breece Hall had some really good games last season, and he's probably the only usable fantasy option for the Jets last season, maybe even the season before, and probably for the next 3 or 4 seasons. But he kind of smacks of like late career Zeke Elliott. Like he's going to continue to have a couple games where you're like, damn, I should have started Breece Hall, but you're probably not going to win anything if Breece Hall is a regular starter for you. You're just going to have to get lucky with the plug and play. I don't know that there's definitely better places for him to go because the Jets don't have a great offensive line. They spent a bunch of money on defense today. I don't know if they're planning on going more into the offensive line, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot to get out there with the offensive line. I think that the Jets have 2 first-round picks, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't know that they're going to spend 2 of those on the offensive line. But I don't know how much he improves going elsewhere. Like maybe he would go to the Chiefs, which was a kind of a popular destination for him to go. We'll see. Maybe he could have gone to the Saints. That's one. Obviously, both of those teams we'll talk about later on with this. But I don't really know how good of a player Breece Hall is anymore. So we'll give this like a C+ because he is still going to give you some usable games, but I just don't think that Breece Hall, if you're in a dynasty, is like one of your 1, 2, or even a flex option. Maybe he's a flex option depending on how deep your league is, but he's definitely not like a high-end, even like a 0 RB target. Maybe he's that's where he's morphing into. He's like a 0 RB target that has some high upside for you potentially, and he will get carries. But he's not going to be someone that you're building your team around. So we're going to go C+ for Breece Hall staying with the Jets. All right, let's see here. Number 3 on the list, Malik Willis. With these backup quarterbacks signing a big deal the next season. I don't really know what the success rate is. I was trying to kind of look up other players that have had these kind of deals. Obviously, Matt Flynn and Brock Osweiler are the two that really come to mind that had some good games as a backup. I don't even know how many great games Brock Osweiler had as a backup. I think he was more just tall, and they thought that he was going to be great. But they both did not pan out. Then I guess you could kind of look at Daniel Jones from last season, but again, he was a starter for a lot of years. We kind of knew what he had with him, and then he goes to Minnesota and gets revamped. Maybe Sam Darnold going to the Vikings, but he didn't sign a big deal. He, if anything, got the job because of J.J. McCarthy's injury, or maybe they extended J.J. McCarthy's injury to make sure that Sam Darnold played. But either way, it was not like Sam Darnold signed to be the starter when they brought him in. So with Malik Willis, it's going to be interesting because the problem, yes, Tua was a problem for the Dolphins, especially last season. It was really pretty obvious that he was not playing at his peak and that the injuries were starting to take a toll. But the offensive line was the problem. And the way that, the Dolphins still were able to run the ball great. Again, on that same team that I won a championship with Alec Pierce, my probably best player was Devon Achane. And he still is going to go into a position where he's going to have Devon Achane, have Jalen Waddle. We'll see if Darren Waller comes back, who did play well last season. So they have weapons there, but the offensive line is terrible, and the defense played better at the end of the season. But I don't know that Malik Willis is going to be able to take advantage of any of those things. I don't really know if he was that great in Green Bay. Like, again, if you take Jordan Love off of Green Bay, how great is he at other places as well? He's a good quarterback, but Green Bay has a really great setup, offensive line and weapons-wise. How great is Malik Willis going to be for the Dolphins? I don't think the expectations for him in real life is to go out there and win games, but from a fantasy perspective, himself, he might be a good fantasy scorer because he will have to run around, and he is a good athlete. And he can throw the ball deep, so that'll happen. Like, he will be a good scorer for you, but for the rest of the Dolphins offense, I don't know if that's absolutely the best quarterback that they could have brought in, and it still does not fix the main problem of the offense. So we're going to go, again, with a C+, similar to Breece Hall here. It's a signing. It could be good, but we'll have to see it happen. Okay, so not a signing, but a trade. Michael Pittman Jr. to the Steelers. This one I really don't get from the Steelers' perspective. I was listening to Mike Florio talk about this, Pro Football Talk, and he was basically saying, all right, seems like there's probably another move to go along with this because there's questions about DK Metcalf's contract with the suspension from the end of the season, and of course they don't have a quarterback. Like, maybe Rodgers comes back, and maybe Michael Pittman Jr. is a good wide receiver for Rodgers, big physical wide receiver on both sides that can just throw fades to, because that's basically what Rodgers can do, fades and slants at this point, whatever they can do on a three-step drop. So maybe that is a good signing and they can just kind of bully ball their way down the field. But the Steelers' problem wasn't a secondary wide receiver, I don't think. And they moved off of Minkah Fitzpatrick. Their defense is super old. They lost Kenneth Gainwell. Like, from a real-life perspective, I don't understand this, and it feels like there's going to be more moves going on. But let's just assume, for now, that he is going to be the number 2 wide receiver to DK Metcalf, and Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback. Michael Pittman Jr. is going to be damn near unplayable on a week-to-week basis. I don't think that he was necessarily that playable on the Colts last season, maybe even the last 2 seasons. He did a little bit better, I think, with Anthony Richardson when he was kind of really rolling at the beginning of 2 years ago. But I don't think that he has really been that playable, kind of going back to maybe Matt Ryan, even Carson Wentz in Indianapolis. So I don't know that you're necessarily losing that much. I just don't think that at this point Michael Pittman is that usable of a wide receiver. And if he goes into another position where he's the wide receiver 2, they'll call this a C. Now, if he is the wide receiver 1 and they end up moving on from DK Metcalf, regardless of who the quarterback is, that is probably an A move if you're a Michael Pittman Jr. owner or you want to have him on your team, because you're going to be able to get him late and he's going to be a good wide receiver with a lot of volume on probably not that great of an offense, but He'll probably get some touchdowns for you, and he could get a couple 100-yard games for you. So I think that depending on the moves, it's either a C or an A for Michael Pittman Jr. to the Steelers. I think we got 6 more to go here, and we got some big ones left. George Pickens staying in Dallas with the franchise tag. George Pickens was better than anybody could have expected last season, and I think that keeping him in Dallas was the obvious move for both the Cowboys and George Pickens. That's their only shot of really competing, is just airing the ball out, getting kind of vintage Dak, which they did get last season, and just outscoring teams. Maybe they're going to improve their defense, but from a real life perspective, this was the only one that really made sense. And from a fantasy perspective, I think it's the one that makes the most sense as well. CeeDee Lamb is top 5 probably wide receiver in the league, and he attracts a lot of attention. And he plays a slightly different game than George Pickens because he has probably a more, I'm not a super football guy. Like, I don't know all the ins and outs of how you're running a route tree, but it seems like he has more passes around the field where George Pickens can kind of play off of that and probably get more one-on-ones on his side of the ball, which in that situation, if he's one-on-one, if he's not playing like the number one corner on a team, he's going to probably get open more often than not. Not to mention they have Jake Ferguson. They were able to run the ball last year. I think that they brought back the running back, Williams, from last year. So I think that this is probably a great signing, and I think that George Pickens is probably another top 10 wide receiver. We're going to give it an A, maybe to A+. It would be an A+ if he signed a long-term contract. He's there for one more season. Maybe it's even an A+ if you're a dynasty owner of George Pickens, because who knows what situation will open up next year. And another year with the Cowboys, maybe he does end up as a number 1 wide receiver somewhere in a pass-happy offense that needs a wide receiver 1. That could be the best scenario for George Pickens, but either way, it's an A for 2026 for George Pickens on the franchise tag back to the Cowboys. Tua to the Falcons. For some reason, I didn't even really think about the Falcons going out and getting a quarterback, let alone Tua, who I think was probably the best quarterback available. I know that Malik Willis was got the most money. It's going to be the most money that any quarterback got, but Tua is better than Malik Willis. Let's just be honest. Tua is better than Malik Willis. The situation in Miami was not good towards the end there. When they went out and got Tyreek Hill, that ruined everything that they had going in Miami. I know that they had a playoff season after they got him, but I don't think that they needed Tyreek Hill to get that playoff season. Maybe they could have gotten another wide receiver to go along with Waddle, but Waddle was the right number 1 for Mike McDaniel's offense with Tua, and they should have spent that money on the goddamn offensive line. But Tua is still one of the more accurate passers in the league when he is protected. Atlanta has a miles better offensive line than what he had in Miami. And Bijan, I think Tyler Algier left, but they still have Bijan, which might be a bigger move for Bijan than actually adding Tua. And the fact that he is going to have to kind of fight with Michael Penix to start, I think it's going to really just depend on who's healthy each and every week. And he has Kyle Pitts there, who Tua is really good with a tight end. I don't think that you want to forget that Tua is a really good quarterback for tight ends. And you have Drake London on the outside. We'll see who they end up having as the number 2, because I think they let Mooney move on. So we'll see who they have as the number 2 going into the season, if they draft somebody or whatever it's going to be. But a lot of weapons, a better offensive line. I think that Tua, it's not, again, you're not going to start Tua. Miami, wherever he went, New York, wherever he ended up, you're not going to start Tua. But for the Falcons offense, Tua might be an upgrade over Michael Penix. And at the very least, he will be able to step in for Michael Penix and keep the offense going. So from that perspective, we're going to give it a B. Again, it's still Tua after all the head injuries, and it's still the Falcons with whatever the hell they're doing down there. But I don't think that Tua could have gotten a much better situation than what he's got in Atlanta, so we'll go B. 4 more to go, and we've got the big ones left there. DJ Moore to the Bills, a trade that happened a couple days before this free agency day. Honestly, I don't know. I think that Josh Allen has missed out on a top-level wide receiver kind of since Diggs started to fall off a little bit, and of course since they moved on from Diggs. But I mean, Diggs was great for the Bills for a couple seasons. He would always fall off at the end. That's the problem with the Bills, is those late season games are going to be tough. supposedly this new stadium that they're going to play in this season, starting this season, should help with some of the late season Buffalo weather. So maybe that'll help. But I also just don't think that DJ Moore is actually that good. I think that DJ Moore had some good times in Chicago. I think his first season there with Justin Fields, he had 1,000 yards. I don't think that he's had that much success. Chicago has also added on a bunch of wide receivers. They added Odunze and Allen, and then, this last season, Odunze and probably more of the tight ends. And Caleb Williams is a good quarterback. Obviously, it's an upgrade going to Josh Allen, and he's going to be the number one wide receiver for whatever that means in how the Bills run their offense, which is basically just let Josh Allen make the plays. So we'll see. But I actually don't believe that much in DJ Moore. And to be honest, I don't believe that much in wide receivers on the Bills. I think that Josh Allen, for one, spreads the ball around a little too much. They're going to run the ball both with Josh Allen as well as James Cook, who they've put some money into. And they have two good tight ends that they're going to go to. If they're not running the ball, they're going to go to those players in the red zone. And they have a bunch of these gadget players like Shakir, and they're still going to continue to keep what's his name, the wide receiver they drafted in the second round involved that they've been talking all this shit about in the offseason. So DJ Moore is nominally going to be the number one option for Josh Allen, which seems like a good thing, but I don't think that it's all that's cracked up to be, especially for a player like DJ Moore who's not that good in and of himself. So we're actually going to go C with this. I do think that it's maybe a slight improvement. I don't even know that it's a slight improvement from the Bears, but it's a move. I think that a lot of people are going to be attracted to it, but I would not, especially like at cost for what it's going to cost to get DJ Moore. If you're doing a redraft league or if you're trying to trade for him in a dynasty league, I would absolutely stay away. So that's why I'm going to put it as a C, even if it is a slight upgrade for DJ Moore overall, which I'm not necessarily convinced that it is. I forgot to do the spin, but Travis Etienne to the Saints. This was one that was pretty surprising to me. For one, I wasn't really on the radar that Travis Etienne might move on from the Jags. Not that surprising. He's had some up and down seasons. He did really well last year, but I think that Bashal Tutin was always going to take over if they did. Like, they were not going to spend a bunch of money on keeping Travis Etienne, especially with the amount of money they put into Lawrence and the amount of money that they're putting into the wide receivers. I think that that is a smart move for their offense to throw the ball more often. And I think that the Jaguars are going to be fine without Travis Etienne, even if they're going to lose a little bit in the backfield, because he is a good player. But him going to the Saints for real money and a real contract, like 4 for 55, I think is what it was, is interesting to me. I think that this signals that they're moving on from Alvin Kamara. Maybe they'll keep him there for this season and they'll have like a pretty crazy two-headed monster. But Alvin Kamara is getting older. He seems to have actually kind of stayed pretty good, even when the Saints haven't been that good and he's getting older. But I don't think that they're going to rely on him that much going forward. And this Travis Etienne deal is kind of indication of that. Now, how good is the Saints offense going to be? It was pretty good at the end of the season with Shuck, with Chris Olave really coming on at the end of the season. I mean, I was playing Chris Olave in a championship in one of my dynasty leagues or one of my fantasy leagues, and I was afraid of him because of the run he made through the playoffs. So maybe this is a move forward for the Saints offense, which has improved under Kellen Moore and maybe will be good next season. They start Shuck from the beginning of the season and move forward with that. It'll be interesting to see. But I don't really know what to make of what they're going to do with Travis Etienne. Is he going to just step into the Alvin Kamara role? Or are they going to keep Alvin Kamara and they're going to go a two-headed monster with him? So we'll do 2 grades for this. If he's just going to go two-headed monster with Alvin Kamara, I would say it's a C plus B, because I still think that he's going to end up getting kind of goal line carries, or he's going to get touchdown equity with the Saints regardless. If they move on from Alvin Kamara this season, and it's all Travis Etienne, or Travis Etienne mostly with whoever they have as their backup running back, Kendre Miller or whoever they decide to keep on there, this is an A. I think that the Saints offense is on an upward trajectory. This is a really good running back that fits kind of that similar role. Kellen Moore obviously had the season with Saquon the year before he gets to the Eagles, or before he gets to the Saints with the Eagles. Didn't do that great in I guess Dallas or LA with running backs. Well, no, he had Tony Pollard in Dallas. So maybe this is Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne's the next step of that evolution. And they put money in that seems like they're going to give him the ball. So I'm going to say A if they move on from Alvin Kamara, C plus B if they stick with him. K9, KW3 to the Chiefs. I've been fooled by Kenneth Walker before, and I would imagine that many of you fantasy players have been fooled by Kenneth Walker as well. He is an incredible running back, an incredible athlete, and he can make some of the craziest runs and has made some of the craziest runs. I mean, he really did kind of fill in the beast mode role for the Seahawks, especially through this last playoff run. And I'm from the Northwest, from Oregon. I don't like the Seahawks because specifically they're being shoved down your throat in Oregon like you're supposed to be a Seahawks fan. I don't fucking want to root on a Seattle team, but the Seahawks were a great team this year, and he was a great part of it in the playoffs and in towards the later part of the season with Charbonnet going out. Now, fantasy-wise, and real life wise, it's hard to depend on him because he is injury riddled and because it seems like it's not always happening for him. It seems like, well, the biggest thing, I mean, especially last season, watching the Seahawks last season with him and Geno in the backfield was like they could go for 100 yards right now. Like they could run this ball out of the stadium and score an incredible touchdown, or they could go 100 yards the other way. It could be snapped over Geno's head. It could be like hand it off to Kenneth Walker and he runs back 10 yards trying to get 3 yards. And he will do that to you multiple times a game, it feels like, if they don't make him run straight forward. And the Chiefs offense over these last couple seasons has been that similar kind of thing where it's not even that they could go 100 yards one way. You still think that because they have Patrick Mahomes back there, but it's more like they're going to go 4 or 5 yards forward, or they could go 4 or 5 yards back or fumble the ball or whatever it is. And Kenneth Walker, I don't think, is necessarily the greatest answer to that kind of offense. Now, he is way better than any of the running backs they've had. Maybe before Pacheco broke his leg, he was pretty good, but he hasn't been great since then. They were really just giving Kareem Hunt the ball to run up the middle this last year. Kareem Hunt was kind of doing that late stage Zeke Elliott like we were talking about earlier on with, I can't remember who we were talking about, but Kenneth Walker will get them more yards. And if they can improve their offensive line, which who says that they will, and they have to rely on the run game early on in the season with Patrick Mahomes either down or playing hobbled, then you could get some good time out of Kenneth Walker. But I think that, again, this is an at-cost thing where Kenneth Walker III, the Super Bowl MVP running back, going to what is supposedly one of the best offenses in the league, should be something that you're going to pay high on, like DJ Moore. But it's not worth it. The juice is not worth the squeeze. Now, I think that Kenneth Walker III is a better player than DJ Moore, even at position. And I think that he is a better fit in the Chiefs offense than what DJ Moore is to the Bills fantasy-wise. But Kenneth Walker III is a high-risk, high-reward player. The Chiefs are a high-risk, high-reward offense. I and my Dynasty League kind of relied on Rashee Rice last year, and I don't know that I'm necessarily loving the idea of bringing him in as one of my top 2 wide receivers for next season because of all that's kind of going on with the Chiefs and how bad they were at the end of the season, especially without Mahomes, and we'll see how quickly Mahomes gets back. So for this move, I'm going to say C, and I might even go like closer to C minus because at cost, I think you're losing a lot for someone that has Kenneth Walker in Dynasty with him going to the Chiefs. And even worse, if you're trying to draft him, you're having to probably pay more this year for Kenneth Walker for a worse version of him because of what he did at the end of the season, going through, winning Super Bowl MVP, and because of where he's going. It's just a big drop-off for him. Now, if you are a Dynasty owner and your league is open, or if the hype keeps up as we get into the season, maybe you can get more for Kenneth Walker if you're willing to risk that, depending on where you're at with your roster. Maybe that is the silver lining for Kenneth Walker owners. But redraft leagues and Dynasty leagues where people are a little bit smarter, I would stay away from Kenneth Walker. We're going to go C to C minus for this one. And that just leaves one. We're still going to spin it, but we're going to land on Mike Evans to the Niners. Yeah, I don't know that the best place for injury-riddled 30-plus-year-old wide receiver is the San Francisco 49ers. Regardless of who it is, this dude has had real injury problems over the past couple of seasons, and the Niners, for whatever reason, have the worst injury luck, we'll say, in the league. And maybe it's not even luck. Maybe it's that they have built their stadium on literally an injury graveyard, and they've now brought in Mike Evans to be presumably their number one wide receiver. I mean, what, Ricky Pearsall? Jawan Jennings? I don't know if I know that Pearsall will be there next year, but I don't know if Jawan Jennings is back or what. George Kittle is hurt. In a vacuum, Mike Evans with Brock Purdy is good. Great, even. I really like that combination because Brock Purdy can make some things happen. Mike Evans, a big wide receiver that will make contested catches. He's going to score you touchdowns. That's what Mike Evans does for you. He's not a top-of-the-line wide receiver. I don't even know in his best days that he was a wide receiver that you're drafting as a number. You could draft him as a number one, but most likely you were like, all right, 0 RB, Mike Evans is my number 2 wide receiver. I know that I'm going to potentially get a touchdown every single week from him. And maybe that's what he ends up doing with the Niners. But now it's like, I can still get a touchdown every single week from Mike Evans, but it might end up being 8 touchdowns in a season because he's only going to play 8 games. And I think that the Niners, obviously, just that whole thing makes it worse. And now you add into that, Christian McCaffrey is going to get a lot more touchdowns, both from running and passes in the red zone. That might take away a little bit of Mike Evans' value. George Kittle, we don't know when he's going to get back, but obviously he is also a red zone option. Tungus had some good red zone work last year as well with George Kittle out. So all that to be said, high end, this could be awesome. High end, this could be awesome for Mike Evans. It could be one of the best signings of the offseason, especially because I don't think that this is going to get the same kind of hype that maybe these other moves that won't pan out quite as well, or that don't have as high of upside, I should say, will get. I don't think it's going to get that same kind of hype, so you won't have to pay the same kind of cost for Mike Evans. But the low end for this is you just don't have maybe your third wide receiver that you picked in a redraft, third or fourth wide receiver that you picked in a redraft. If you get him as your fourth wide receiver without kind of sacrificing at another position, that is great value for Mike Evans. But if you're drafting him as your third or even second, depending on how this kind of changes the market for wide receiver, you're asking for a lot of risk from this older wide receiver that's already had injury issues going to the most injury-riddled team in the league. So with that being said, we're going to give it a B because I don't know that necessarily the injury luck changes for him going to Tampa Bay to San Francisco, and I think that there's a higher upside for him in San Francisco. It's a better offense, but it doesn't get up any higher because you could very well just be without Mike Evans for many of your most important games next year, so it's going to stay at a B. All right, I know that I've done fantasy football content on my main channel way back in the day if you've been watching me for a long time there, but this is my first time really diving into it on this channel. Like I said, we're just going to kind of put some more stuff out on this channel as it is more Bucky Barracks, and fantasy football is one of my favorite kind of sports to interact with, so we'll do more of that stuff as we get closer to the regular season, and I'm going to get into more fantasy leagues this year, potentially even doing maybe a membership league here if you guys would be interested in doing that. I want to be a little bit more interactive on this channel. So we're going to talk more about fantasy football as we get closer to the season. But let me know if you like this, if you like this kind of setup, and if you want me to do some more updates like around the draft, more specifically on fantasy football, or if you want to hear more of my like real life football takes on the NFL. But like and subscribe. You can check out this new hat in my linked products below. I've got a couple new hats that my wife is getting me because it's near my birthday. So I will have some new hats in the products below. I'll try to get all my hats in there because I know that's kind of my style. So I'll try to get all of my hats that I can in my product links if you guys are interested in them. Other than that, subscribe to more Bucky Barracks for more.